Hello everyone, Melanie here with Vintage Hill Studio. Thank you so much for dropping by today for this cute little Catching Snowflakes card. This will be one die used two ways. I'll explain more about that later. Here's what our card will look like. These are the papers we'll be using, and this is the die set from Sizzix. It is so adorable. The only piece I won't use are these little snowball looking things. Now, one of the secrets to this card is using regular printer paper. This is letterhead that you run through your printer for like Christmas letters, and I'll be using 1/4 of this for my card because I like that little border of holly. Now my card base is 5 by 7. I'll be matting it with this letterhead. All the supplies and dimensions can be found on my card blog. I use this Caterpillar Pro self-sharpening paper cutter. So what happens is when you roll this blade back and forth, it sharpens the blade. It's a wonderful paper cutter. So here's the mat for the front of my green card base, and I will be using this Snowflakes embossing folder, and it doesn't fit over the whole piece of paper, which is just fine. I just want to go on the inside of that holly border like this. I'm going to use tab 1 on my extended platform of my Big Shot die cutting machine to run my embossing folder through. Top that with a plate and I'll get that run through very quickly. Now of course this is pretty lightweight paper, so you can see it leaves a few little creases, but that doesn't bother me. And I'll get that put down on the top of that green card base. There's a close-up look at that embossed snowflake design. And then we're ready to move on to the die cutting. So I'll be using this cream color of cardstock for my little girl. And I like using this because it just adds a little more depth than a plain piece of white cardstock would. And I will come back with my markers and start getting this colored in. She's a lot of fun to color. I like to look at my colors off to the side there to make sure I'm aware of what I'm working with here. And you can see I just use whatever markers I've got handy. I am not tied to any one brand of marker. I just use what I think looks the best. Add a little cheek color, and I'll go back and forth here between pens and do some blending. Okay, so you can see her face is very tiny, as is her hand. So I'm just adding the barest minimum shading to each of those parts. And then I will move on to coloring in her boot. And for that I like to use 2 shades of brown, a lighter and a darker. And I need to go back and check these shades before I start adding them, because one of them is for her hair and 2 of them are for the boot. So I'll go in with my lightest color first. And you can see this coloring goes very quickly because the parts of this die are fairly small. So your shading and highlighting is pretty minimal. Just make sure you go in and blend your colors. And you will be done with each part of this fairly quickly. Biggest part will be her coat and hat. Okay, and then I'm going to go quickly around her hair with this darker brown, being careful to stay away from her face and that cap. Now the die gives you some little perforations so you can tell where the hat starts, where the face starts. It's really undetectable once all your image is colored in, but it sure does help to contain your markers in the appropriate spots. Using a little gray for her stocking here. And then this new Spectrum Noir Tri-Blend marker is the dark red blend. It's got a lighter red, which is what I'm starting with to color in her whole coat using the light red color. You can see I'm kind of outlining it, and then I'll fill it in very quickly. And then I'll move on to the mid-tone of the red to do a little shading. And each time I do shading, I go back to the previous color. So light red first, then I'll move on to the medium red for some shading, and then I'll go back to the light red and do some blending. And then again, as I go from medium to dark, I will add my dark red, go back and blend in with my medium red. So you just go one up on the color and one down for blending. One up and one down for blending. That's it. And it makes it so simple because this tri-blend is the exact shades of red that you need to do perfect blending. Now, I'm by no means a professional at this, so the tri-blend is a friend if you're not real confident with your blending yet. You can see she's starting to take some shape here and go from a flat image to an image with a little bit of perceived dimension, just with the shading and the highlights left behind. Okay, going back now, back and forth with the shading and the blending. And that is really the most labor-intensive part of this card, is coloring this little image, and it's really not that bad. So it was a lot of fun to do this. Now hang in there with me, because later in the video I'm going to show you the option number 2, which is paper piecing. And I'll show you how that works with some printed paper for her coat and hat. So hang in there with me. It's towards the end of the video, but I promise to show you one die with 2 ways. And here is our little colored image, and I just think she's adorable. Alright, now there's a little die right here that gives you the cuff on her sleeve, the little pom-pom on the top of her hat, as well as the top of her pocket. And you can see it cuts out those itty-bitty little pieces. I'll bring over my jewel picker and get these set on my image with just some little dots of glue to hold them in place. And you could get as fancy as you want with this. I thought about shading these little pieces, but they're so tiny I decided to just leave them as is. So normally I would go and shade with a little lighter gray, but in this case they're so tiny I just thought that looks pretty good right there. So I want to offset her on the front of my card right about there. The only thing I have left are these snowflakes as far as the die cutting parts, and I'm going to bring over kind of that bluish shade and a white glitter cardstock and cut out several snowflakes, more than I need, but this allows me to play with the design of the snowflakes on the front of my card. So I'll get my little girl put down in place, and then I will move forward with adhering these snowflakes. And the rest of this goes really quickly. Now you can see in the design to the left that those little dots that I didn't use make little snowball looking features. And I tried that, but the dots are so small it really wasn't worth dealing with. So I'll show you what I did to fill in around these snowflakes in just a second. Okay, just adding a few dots of glue. And I'll add a few snowflakes, and then I'll come back and show you the finished product with all the snowflakes in place. So that's what I did. Just kind of spaced things out with glue and started adhering the snowflakes until I liked the design. Now, instead of the snowballs, I used this enamel accents in white, and I'm adding snow this way. So when this dries, this will be dimensional little balls of snow coming in between all the snowflakes, and I like how that looked, and it was so much easier to work with than the little dots from the die. So this is what our little card looks like at this point, and she's so adorable. Now option 2 is the paper piecing. So what you would do is take your die, find some patterned paper that you like for coat and hat, and then as I stated before, you can see those little die cut lines in your design there, in your image. That helps you see what you need to cut away in order to keep her hat and the coat part, which is what you will piece on top of your girl if you were to choose to do this paper piecing. See, I'm just snipping all these pieces off, and look how that would lay right over where her coat goes. And that gives you another option for using the same die but with patterned paper. And that's how easy that would go together if that's what you chose to do. All right, I think that's cute as well. And you could add that little top pocket and be done with that paper piecing. But here is the card that I chose to go with today, and that's with the colored in image. And I use that same embossing folder on the inside of my card. And then I have my easy peasy lined envelope. I have YouTube videos on how to make your own lined envelopes with no special dies or measurements, so take a look at that if you're interested. I hope you enjoyed this video, that you will give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment. Feel free to subscribe to my card blog or my YouTube channel to see weekly videos. This was a lot of fun. If you have a chance to pick up this die, I would encourage you to do so. And happy crafting, everyone!